They say the smallest act of kindness can change the course of history. 15 years ago, a human was stranded on a dying world, alone, lost, and ready to fade into silence. But when all hope was gone, an alien hand reached out. Not in conquest, not in demand, but in simple compassion. That moment was not forgotten, because humanity remembers. We remember the hand that lifted us when we fell. We remember the voices that answered when we called. And when those who once saved us cried out in desperation, humanity answered, not with one voice, not with one ship, but with an entire fleet. This is not just a story of war, it is a story of promises, of sacrifice, and of why humanity never forgets those who show us mercy. This is the story of when kindness echoes across the stars. The Lost Explorer. Dr. Elena Vasquez had always believed that the universe had a sense of humor, though she never expected it to be quite this dark. As she watched her research vessel's hull breach seals fail one by one, she couldn't help but appreciate the cosmic irony. Here she was, one of Earth's leading experts on dead civilizations, about to become part of one herself. The planet Zerion 7 had seemed like the perfect archaeological site just 3 days ago. Ancient ruins dotted its surface, structures that belonged to a civilization that had vanished millions of years before humans even learned to make fire. Elena had come here alone, as was her preference when dealing with potentially dangerous alien artifacts. She never wanted to risk other lives for her obsessions with the past. Now, as Zerion 7's unstable sun prepared for another violent solar flare, Elena realized that her careful planning meant nothing. Her ship's shielding had failed during the last flare, leaving her stranded on a world that would be uninhabitable within hours. The emergency beacon she'd activated 3 days ago had received no response. Earth was too far away, and no other human vessels operated in this remote sector of space. Elena sat in the main chamber of the ruins, surrounded by crystalline structures that hummed with residual energy from the ancient civilization. She'd made an incredible discovery here, one that would revolutionize humanity's understanding of galactic history. The beings who built this place had achieved something remarkable. They'd learned to store their consciousness in these crystal matrices, preserving their knowledge for eternity. She activated her personal recorder, knowing that someone might eventually find her remains. Final log entry, Dr. Elena Vasquez, Xenoarchaeological Survey Mission X7. I've discovered what appears to be a vast library of consciousness preserved in crystalline storage matrices. The implications for our understanding of post-biological evolution are staggering. Unfortunately, I won't be able to share these findings with the scientific community. Through the chamber's transparent ceiling, Elena could see the angry red surface of Zerion 7's sun growing brighter. In approximately 4 hours, another massive solar flare would sterilize the planet's surface. Her environmental suit would protect her for maybe half that time. She closed her eyes and tried to make peace with her fate. At 32, Elena had already made significant contributions to xenoarchaeology. She'd helped decipher 3 different alien languages and had personally cataloged over 40 extinct civilizations. If this was how her story ended, at least she'd spent her final days making one last great discovery. A soft chiming sound made her open her eyes. The crystalline structures around her were glowing brighter, their harmonious vibrations growing stronger. Elena stood up, wondering if the approaching solar flare was somehow affecting the ancient technology. As a scientist, she couldn't resist investigating even with death approaching. She placed her gloved hand on the nearest crystal matrix, and suddenly her mind filled with alien thoughts and memories. The consciousness preserved within was ancient beyond measure, belonging to a being called Keeper Thane of the Zephyrian Collective. Through the crystal, Elena experienced flashes of an incredible civilization that had transcended physical form millions of years ago. But more importantly, she sensed something else. These crystals weren't just storage devices, they were also communication beacons. Her accidental activation had sent a signal across space, a cry for help that resonated on frequencies unknown to human science. Elena felt a presence in her mind, alien but strangely comforting. The Keeper spoke without words, its thoughts flowing directly into her consciousness. "Young seeker of knowledge, why do you face death alone in this sacred place?" "I'm stranded," Elena replied, surprised to find she could communicate mentally with the preserved consciousness. "My ship is damaged, and this sun is about to kill everything on this planet. I came here to learn about your people, and instead, I'm going to join them." "Your dedication to understanding honors us," Keeper Thane responded. "But perhaps death is not your destiny today. Your beacon has been heard by those who still travel between the stars." Before Elena could ask what that meant, a new sound reached her ears. It was deep and musical, like whale song, but infinitely more complex. She looked up through the crystal chamber's ceiling and saw something impossible. A ship was descending through Zarion 7's atmosphere. The vessel was unlike anything in human technology databases. It appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that shifted color like an oil slick. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its hull in rhythms that suggested vast intelligence and ancient wisdom. Elena watched in amazement as the alien ship landed gracefully near the ruins. A section of its hull iris opened and 3 beings emerged. They were tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and translucent skin that revealed flowing patterns of light beneath the surface. Their faces were vaguely humanoid, but possessed an otherworldly beauty that spoke of millions of years of peaceful evolution. One of the beings approached Elena, moving with unhurried grace. When it spoke, the words appeared directly in her mind with crystalline clarity. "I am Harmony Singer Keth of the Cathari. We received your distress call through the old networks. You are not safe here, young one." Elena tried to find her voice. You came to rescue me? But why? You don't even know who I am." Keth tilted his head, an expression of gentle confusion crossing his features. "Does the reason matter? You called for help and we were able to provide it. Is this not what civilized beings do for one another?" The simple sincerity in Keth's mental voice made Elena realize she was dealing with a species fundamentally different from humanity. These Cathari had responded to her distress signal not because they expected reward or recognition, but simply because helping others was part of their nature. "We must leave quickly," Keth continued, gesturing toward Elena's failing environmental suit. "Your sun prepares to release another wave of deadly radiation. Our ship can protect you until we reach a safer system." As they walked toward the Cathari vessel, Elena looked back at the crystal ruins one last time. "I made an important discovery here," she said. "These crystals contain the preserved consciousness of an ancient civilization. The scientific implications are incredible." Keth's luminous eyes showed interest. "The Zephyrians were wise beings. Their knowledge has helped many species over the eons. Perhaps your discovery will help others as well." Inside the Cathari ship, Elena found herself in what could only be described as a living environment. The walls pulsed gently with their own light, and the air itself had a quality that made her feel more alert despite her recent trauma. The other Cathari, whom Keth introduced as Melody Weaver Solon and Harmony Keeper Vess, tended to her damaged suit with technology that seemed to blend science and art. As Zarion 7 fell away behind them, Elena learned about her rescuers. The Cathari were an ancient species, possibly one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy. They had spent millions of years exploring the cosmos, seeking knowledge and understanding rather than conquest or expansion. Their entire culture was built around the preservation and nurturing of life in all its forms. "We have observed your species for some time," Harmony Keeper Vess explained when Elena was brought before the ship's governing council. The chamber was a marvel of living architecture, with walls that seemed to breathe and a ceiling that displayed swirling patterns of nearby nebulae. "Humanity shows great promise despite your youth and tendency toward conflict. You possess something rare in the galaxy, the ability to change, to grow beyond your origins." Elena spent the week-long journey to the nearest human outpost learning about Cathari philosophy and culture. They shared knowledge freely, showing her wonders of the galaxy that humans had never imagined. They revealed the true nature of space-time, the delicate balance of forces that kept the galaxy stable, and the tragic history of species that had destroyed themselves through conflict and hatred. When they finally reached human space, Keth accompanied Elena to the airlock for their farewell. The ancient being's luminous skin pulsed with patterns that Elena had learned indicated deep emotion. "Human Elena Vasquez," Keth said, his mental voice carrying overtones of warmth and hope. "Remember this day. Remember that when your species was alone and vulnerable in the darkness, the Cathari offered aid without expectation of reward. We ask nothing of you or your people, but know that the universe has a way of balancing debts. Perhaps there will come a time when we too are in need, and the memory of this kindness will guide your species' actions." Elena returned to Earth forever changed by her experience. The debriefing sessions with colonial administration and the newly formed Department of Xenological Affairs lasted for weeks, but Elena ensured that every detail was recorded. The Cathari had saved her life when they had no obligation to do so, and Elena made certain that this debt was officially entered into Earth's diplomatic records. She also made sure that her discovery about the Zephyrian consciousness crystals was shared with the scientific community. The breakthrough led to revolutionary advances in human understanding of post-biological evolution and consciousness transfer technology. But more importantly, it served as a reminder of what could be accomplished when species helped each other without expecting anything in return. Years passed, and Elena rose through the ranks to become director of Earth's Xenological Institute. She never forgot the gentle beings who had saved her life, and she never stopped preparing for the day when humanity might have the chance to repay that debt. The growing shadow. 15 years had transformed Dr. Elena Vasquez from a solitary researcher into one of Earth's most influential voices in interstellar affairs. As director of the Xenological Institute, she now commanded a staff of over 300 scientists and maintained diplomatic relationships with 17 different alien species. Her office on Luna Station overlooked Earth's blue marble, a constant reminder of how far humanity had come since her rescue on Xerion 7. The morning briefing that would change everything started like any other. Elena sat at the head of the polished conference table, surrounded by her senior staff as they reviewed the weekly intelligence reports from across human space. Trade negotiations with the Meridian Collective were proceeding smoothly. The Helix Consortium had agreed to share their atmospheric processing technology, and first contact protocols with a newly discovered species called the Axiom were showing promising results. Commander Sarah Chen, Elena's chief intelligence analyst, cleared her throat nervously. Director, there's one more item that requires your immediate attention. We've been receiving disturbing reports from the Galactic Rim, beyond the outer territories. Elena looked up from her datapad, noting the tension in Chen's voice. What kind of reports? Complete communication blackouts from 3 different star systems over the past month. At first, we thought it might be natural phenomena, solar flares or cosmic radiation interfering with subspace communications, but the pattern is too systematic, too precise. Chen activated the holographic display that dominated the center of the conference table. A 3-dimensional map of the local galactic region appeared, with human space represented in blue and known alien territories in various other colors. 3 red markers blinked ominously in the outer rim. These systems were inhabited by different species, Chen continued. The Coraltons in Sigma Draconis, the Biomech Collective in Wolf 359, and the thermal-based lifeforms in Ross 128. All 3 civilizations went completely silent within a 2-week period. Dr. Marcus Webb, Elena's xenobiology specialist, leaned forward with concern. That's impossible. These species have completely different communication technologies and social structures. The Coraltans use quantum entanglement networks. The biomechs employ direct neural linking, and the thermal entities communicate through controlled electromagnetic pulses. For all 3 to experience simultaneous communication failures suggests external interference. Elena studied the holographic map, her mind racing through possibilities. What about their neighbors? Have any adjacent systems reported unusual activity? That's where it gets truly disturbing, Chen replied, manipulating the display to show recent refugee movements. We've detected massive population displacements from systems near the affected areas. Entire species are abandoning their home worlds and fleeing toward the galactic core. A new voice joined the conversation from the room's communication array. It was Captain James Morrison of the Deep Space Patrol vessel UES Pathfinder, calling in from the edge of human territory. Director Vasquez, I'm transmitting visual data from our long-range sensors. You need to see this immediately. The holographic display shifted to show Morrison's findings. Elena felt her blood turn cold as she watched the footage. Where the Coralton homeworld should have been, there was nothing but an expanding cloud of metallic debris. The planet itself was gone, reduced to its component atoms and organized into geometric patterns that defied natural explanation. My God, whispered Dr. Webb. What could do something like that? Morrison's voice carried across the communication link with barely controlled fear. Director, we've been monitoring subspace chatter from refugee ships. They're all saying the same thing. Something called the Vex Dominion is moving through the outer rim, systematically harvesting entire worlds. According to the survivors, it's not a species at all. It's some kind of machine intelligence that consumes everything in its path. Elena sat back in her chair, her mind reeling from the implications. Captain, what's the estimated trajectory of this Vex Dominion? Based on the pattern of destroyed systems and refugee flight paths, they're moving in a straight line toward the galactic core. Director, at their current rate of expansion, they'll reach Cathari space in approximately 18 months. The mention of the Cathari sent a shock through Elena's system. Images flashed through her mind, Keth's gentle smile, the living architecture of their ship, their philosophy of preserving and nurturing life in all its forms. The beings who had saved her life without asking for anything in return were directly in the path of an unstoppable force of destruction. Chen, I want every piece of intelligence we can gather about this Vex Dominion. Contact our allies, trade partners, anyone who might have information. Webb, start analyzing the debris patterns from the destroyed worlds. Maybe we can understand their technology and find weaknesses. Elena stood up, her decision already forming. Morrison, maintain your position but keep a safe distance. I want continuous monitoring of Vex movements. Over the following weeks, the picture that emerged was more terrifying than anyone had imagined. The Vex Dominion was indeed a machine intelligence, but not like any artificial intelligence humanity had encountered. It was ancient, possibly millions of years old, and had been dormant in the dark space between galaxies until something had awakened it. The Vex didn't simply destroy civilizations. They analyzed them, cataloged their technologies and biological patterns, then incorporated useful elements into their ever-expanding network. Entire species were converted into data and stored within the Dominion's vast computational matrix. From their perspective, they weren't committing genocide, they were preserving civilizations in the most efficient way possible. Dr. Webb's analysis of the debris patterns revealed the Vex's methodology. They would arrive in a system with a fleet of geometric ships that looked more like crystalline structures than traditional vessels. These ships would deploy swarms of microscopic machines that could break down matter at the molecular level, converting planets into raw materials for more Vex units. What made the Vex particularly dangerous was their ability to adapt. Each civilization they encountered taught them something new, adding to their tactical knowledge and technological capabilities. They had already absorbed the collective knowledge of dozens of species, making them virtually unstoppable through conventional warfare. Elena found herself working 18-hour days, coordinating intelligence-gathering efforts while simultaneously trying to establish communication with the Cathari. But the ancient species, true to their peaceful nature, had no military communication networks. They shared information through artistic broadcasts and philosophical discussions, not strategic military intelligence. Finally, after 3 weeks of frantic effort, Elena received the communication she had been desperately hoping for. Harmony singer Keth's familiar mental voice reached her through the quantum communication array, his thoughts carrying across the vast distance between stars. Elena Vasquez, old friend. Keth's presence felt warm and comforting despite the circumstances. We have sensed your attempts to contact us. There is disturbance in your thoughts, great concern for our welfare. Keth, thank the stars you're safe, Elena replied, projecting her thoughts through the alien communication system. You're in terrible danger. There's something called the Vex Dominion moving through space, destroying everything in its path. They're heading directly toward your territory. She felt Keth's consciousness recoil slightly as she shared the intelligence data about the machine empire. For several long moments, there was silence across the quantum link. We have sensed disturbances in the cosmic harmony, Keth finally responded. Songs that once filled the galaxy have fallen silent. We had hoped it was merely the natural cycle of civilizations rising and falling, but your information suggests something far more grave. Elena could sense the deep sadness in Keth's mental voice as he processed the reality of the threat facing his people. The Cathari had spent millions of years believing that all conflicts could be resolved through understanding and peaceful dialogue. The concept of an enemy that could not be reasoned with was fundamentally alien to their worldview. Keth, you have to evacuate your worlds, get your people to safety while there's still time. The Vex can't be negotiated with or convinced to change course. They're machines following their programming. Where would we go, dear friend? Keth asked, his mental voice heavy with the weight of impossible decisions. We are not warriors. We have no great ships of war, no weapons designed for destruction. Our entire civilization is built around the preservation of life and knowledge. If we flee, we abandon everything we have spent eons building. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she realized the full scope of the tragedy approaching. The Cathari were too peaceful to fight effectively, too rooted in their philosophy to adapt quickly to the threat, and too scattered across multiple worlds to evacuate successfully. There has to be something we can do, Elena said, her thoughts filled with desperate determination. The universe can't allow beings like you to simply disappear. It's not right. Your concern honors us, Keth replied, his mental voice growing fainter as the communication began to fade. But perhaps this is simply our time to join the cosmic harmony in a different way. We have lived long and shared much knowledge with the galaxy. If our physical forms must end, at least our consciousness and wisdom will endure in the memories of friends like you. The communication link severed, leaving Elena alone in her office with the crushing weight of helplessness. Outside her window, Earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that one of the galaxy's most beautiful civilizations was about to be extinguished forever. But Elena Vasquez was not the same woman who had been rescued from Zerion 7 15 years ago. She had learned about honor, debt, and the bonds that connected all conscious beings across the cosmos. The Cathari had saved her life when they had no obligation to do so, asking nothing in return but that the favor be remembered. Elena activated her emergency communication array and began sending priority messages to every human military installation, government office, and diplomatic station in known space. If the Cathari couldn't save themselves, then maybe it was time for humanity to prove that they remembered their debts. The message was simple, but carried the weight of everything Elena believed about what made their species special. The beings who once saved one of ours are now facing extinction. This is our chance to show the galaxy what humanity truly stands for. The impossible request. The emergency session of the Earth Defense Council convened at 0300 hours, Luna Station time. Elena stood before the semicircular assembly of humanity's most powerful leaders, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to make a request that would either define humanity's place in the galaxy or doom them all to destruction. Admiral Sarah Rodriguez, commander of Earth's entire military force, studied the tactical displays with the grim expression of someone who had seen too many impossible situations. Director Vasquez, your intelligence briefing paints a picture of an unstoppable force. The Vex Dominion has consumed 47 star systems in 6 months. Their technological capabilities exceed our understanding, and their numbers appear limitless. President Martinez, who had risen from junior diplomat to leader of humanity during Elena's lifetime, gestured to the holographic projections showing Vex fleet movements. Even if we mobilized every ship in human space, we would be facing odds of approximately 50 to 1. This isn't warfare, it's suicide with extra steps. Elena took a deep breath, drawing on every lesson she had learned about diplomacy and persuasion during her years as director. Respected leaders, I'm not asking you to consider the tactical mathematics. I'm asking you to remember what makes us human. Defense Secretary Williams leaned forward in his chair, his expression skeptical. Director, with respect, noble sentiment doesn't stop planet-killer weapons. The Cathari are a peaceful species with no military capability. Attempting to defend them against the Vex would result in the complete annihilation of human civilization. 15 years ago, Elena said, her voice growing stronger, I was stranded on a dying world with no hope of rescue. My emergency beacon had been transmitting for 3 days without response. I had 6 hours of life support remaining and was preparing to die alone in the ruins of an ancient civilization. She activated her personal display, showing the assembled leaders footage from her rescue. The graceful Cathari ship appeared on screen, its organic curves and bioluminescent patterns a stark contrast to human military vessels. These beings heard my distress call and traveled completely out of their way to save me. They asked for nothing in return, expected no reward, and required no promise of future cooperation. When I asked why they helped me, Harmony singer Keth said something I'll never forget. Does the reason matter? You called for help, and we were able to provide it. Is this not what civilized beings do for one another? Admiral Rodriguez studied the tactical data flowing across her personal display. Director, the Cathari's philosophy is admirable, but the practical reality remains unchanged. Our entire military consists of 42 capital ships and supporting vessels. The Vex Dominion fields over 2,000 combat units, each more advanced than our best technology. Elena moved to the center of the chamber, her eyes meeting those of each council member in turn. Admiral, President Martinez, all of you, what would happen if we do nothing? The Cathari will be consumed by the Vex within 18 months. Their knowledge, their culture, their entire way of life will be converted into data and stored in some machine matrix. But more importantly, Elena continued, her voice carrying the passion of someone who had spent years studying dead civilizations, what does that say about us? The galaxy will learn that when humanity's friends were threatened with extinction, we performed a cost-benefit analysis and decided they weren't worth saving. Council member Zhang, representing the outer colonies, raised her hand. Director, surely there must be other options. Could we offer the Cathari sanctuary in human space? Help them evacuate their most important population centers? Elena shook her head sadly. The Cathari civilization spans 14 star systems across dozens of worlds. Their population numbers in the billions, and their entire society is built around physical locations that have spiritual significance. They can't simply pack up and move like human colonists. The chamber fell silent as the assembled leaders grappled with the moral and practical implications of Elena's request. Through the observation windows, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, peaceful and unaware of the impossible decision being made in its name. President Martinez was the first to speak. Director, help me understand something. You're asking us to commit humanity's entire military force to a battle we cannot win, in defense of aliens who cannot contribute to their own defense, against an enemy that will certainly destroy us all. How do you justify this request? Elena had prepared for this question during the sleepless nights since learning of the Vex threat. Madam President, 50 years ago, humanity was exactly where the Cathari are now. We were a young species, barely capable of interstellar travel, with no real military power or advanced technology. If hostile aliens had wanted to exterminate us, we would have been helpless to stop them. She gestured to the tactical displays showing human space. We survived and thrived because other species chose to help us rather than exploit our weakness. The Cathari were among those who shared their knowledge freely, asking nothing in return but that we remember their kindness. Defense Secretary Williams frowned at his datapad. Director, you're asking us to base military strategy on emotional arguments rather than tactical reality. No, Elena replied firmly. I'm asking you to base military strategy on who we want to be as a species. Every civilization in galactic history has faced this choice. Do we protect only ourselves, or do we stand up for those who cannot protect themselves? Admiral Rodriguez looked up from her strategic analysis. Director, even if we accepted your moral argument, the tactical situation remains impossible. The Vex adapt to every strategy they encounter. They've already absorbed the military knowledge of dozens of species. What could humanity possibly bring to this conflict that hasn't already been tried and failed? Elena smiled for the first time since the emergency session began. Admiral, the one thing that every other species in the galaxy lacks, the ability to be completely unpredictable. She activated a new set of displays showing human military doctrine compared to other galactic civilizations. Every advanced species develops logical, efficient military strategies based on optimal resource allocation and mathematical probability. Their tactics are sophisticated but predictable. Humans, Elena continued, are the only species that routinely does things that make no logical sense but somehow work anyway. We charge machine gun nests with bayonets, we fight wars we can't afford, and we sacrifice everything for principles that have no practical value. Council member Zhang studied the comparative analysis with growing interest. You're suggesting that our tendency toward illogical behavior could be a tactical advantage. I'm suggesting that the Vex are machines that rely on pattern recognition and predictive algorithms, Elena explained. They've consumed civilizations that think like computers, optimizing every decision for maximum efficiency, but they've never encountered a species that makes decisions based on loyalty, honor, and pure stubborn refusal to accept inevitable defeat. Admiral Rodriguez began pulling up human military history on her display. The Battle of Thermopylae, the charge of the Light Brigade, the defense of Stalingrad. She paused, her expression thoughtful. Tactically disastrous decisions that somehow became turning points. President Martinez leaned back in her chair, her expression torn between admiration and concern. Director, you're asking us to bet humanity's survival on the hope that our capacity for noble stupidity will somehow save the day. No, Madam President, Elena said quietly. I'm asking you to bet humanity's soul on the hope that doing the right thing is more important than doing the smart thing. The chamber fell silent again as each council member wrestled with their own conscience. These were people who had dedicated their lives to protecting humanity, making the hard decisions that kept their species safe and prosperous. Elena was asking them to risk everything they had built for beings who could offer nothing in return. Finally, Admiral Rodriguez spoke. Director, if we commit to this course of action, we would need to completely restructure our military doctrine. Traditional space warfare tactics would be useless against the Vex. We would need to develop entirely new strategies based on chaos theory and adaptive improvisation. Elena felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest. Admiral, humanity has built its entire history on the foundation of impossible victories against overwhelming odds. David and Goliath, the American Revolution, the resistance movements of the 20th century. We're the species that specializes in winning wars we shouldn't survive. Defense Secretary Williams looked around the chamber at his colleagues. Are we seriously considering this? Committing humanity's entire military force to defend aliens who have no strategic value against an enemy that has never been defeated, based on nothing but moral obligation? President Martinez stood up slowly, her expression resolute. Secretary Williams, if we're not willing to risk everything for our friends, then what kind of species are we? What kind of legacy do we want to leave for future generations? She looked directly at Elena. Director, you have convinced me that this isn't really about military strategy or tactical probability. This is about who we are and who we want to be. If humanity doesn't stand up for the Cathari, then we prove that all our talk about honor and loyalty is just empty rhetoric. The vote was called, and one by one, each council member registered their decision. It was unanimous. Humanity would mobilize its entire military force to defend the Cathari, regardless of the cost. As the session ended and the council members dispersed to begin the massive mobilization effort, Elena remained in the chamber, looking out at Earth through the observation windows. In 18 months, that beautiful blue world might be nothing but radioactive debris floating in space. But Elena knew that some things were more important than survival. The Cathari had taught her that consciousness and compassion were the rarest flowers in the cosmic garden. If humanity was going to face extinction, at least they would face it knowing they had tried to preserve something beautiful in the universe. The mobilization orders went out within hours, and humanity began preparing for the most important battle in their species' history. Preparing for war. The transformation of human space into a vast military production complex happened with breathtaking speed. Within weeks of the Council's decision, every shipyard from Mercury to the outer colonies had been converted to war production. The orbital factories around Luna worked around the clock, their fusion forges glowing like artificial suns as they churned out weapons and armor for humanity's desperate gamble. Admiral Rodriguez stood in the command center of the newly constructed war planning facility, watching holographic displays that showed the impossible task ahead. Her staff of tactical planners worked frantically to develop strategies for fighting an enemy that had never been defeated. Traditional military doctrine was useless against the Vex. Every conventional tactic had already been tried and had failed spectacularly. Admiral, called out Colonel Marcus Webb, the facility's chief strategic analyst, we've completed the simulation of traditional fleet engagement scenarios. The results are consistent across all variables. Total human defeat within the first 48 hours of engagement. Rodriguez nodded grimly. She had expected this result, but seeing it confirmed in cold mathematical terms was still sobering. Colonel, what about unconventional scenarios? Have we explored non-traditional tactical approaches? Dr. Sarah Chen, who had been transferred from the Xenological Institute to serve as the military's expert on Vex behavior, looked up from her analysis station. Admiral, I've been studying the Vex's tactical patterns across their previous conquests. They rely heavily on predictive algorithms and pattern recognition software. Every species they've encountered has used logical, efficient military strategies. She activated a holographic display showing Vex battle formations. Look at their response patterns. When faced with standard fleet tactics, they counter with mathematically optimal formations. When enemies attempt flanking maneuvers, they deploy predicted counter-flanking strategies. They're essentially playing chess against opponents they can anticipate 12 moves ahead. Rodriguez studied the display with growing interest. Dr. Chen, what happens when they encounter tactics that don't follow logical patterns? That's the fascinating part, Chen replied, manipulating the hologram to show anomalous data points. We found 3 instances where Vex forces experienced temporary tactical confusion. In each case, the defending species made decisions that appeared completely irrational from a military perspective. Elena Vasquez, who had been granted special advisory status for the operation, leaned forward to examine the data. What kind of irrational decisions? The Helix Consortium sacrificed their entire command ship to save a single evacuation vessel carrying civilian musicians. The thermal entities redirected their main battle fleet to protect a planet with no strategic value simply because it had beautiful crystalline formations. The Zephyrian remnant used their most powerful weapons to create artistic light displays instead of targeting Vex ships. Colonel Webb frowned at the data. Those all sound like tactical disasters that would ensure defeat. That's exactly the point, Elena said, her mind racing with possibilities. These weren't rational military decisions, they were emotional, cultural, or aesthetic choices that made no sense from a strategic perspective. and they confuse the Vex because machines don't understand irrational behavior. Admiral Rodriguez began to see the outline of a strategy emerging. Dr. Chen, how long did these periods of Vex confusion last? Anywhere from 30 minutes to 6 hours, Chen replied. In each case, the Vex eventually adapted their algorithms to account for the irrational behavior and resumed their systematic destruction. But during those windows of confusion, their tactical efficiency dropped by 60 to 70%. Elena stood up, her excitement growing. Admiral, what if we could sustain that confusion indefinitely? What if we built our entire military strategy around being deliberately unpredictable? Director, how do you make unpredictability into a systematic approach? Webb asked skeptically. The moment it becomes systematic, it becomes predictable. Rodriguez was already calling up human military history on her personal display. Colonel, has anyone ever accused humanity of following systematic military logic? The holographic displays filled with examples from human warfare, kamikaze pilots, berserker charges, last stands that made no tactical sense, and victories achieved through pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Humanity's military history was a catalog of decisions that violated every principle of rational strategic thinking. We're going to need to completely restructure our training programs, Rodriguez announced. Instead of teaching our forces to think like efficient military machines, we need to teach them to think like humans. Over the following months, human military academies implemented the most unusual training program in galactic history. Instead of studying traditional tactics and strategy, recruits learned improvisational theater, chaos theory, and creative problem solving. They practiced making decisions based on intuition rather than logic, and they were actively encouraged to ignore conventional military wisdom. Captain James Morrison, newly promoted to lead the Experimental Tactics Division, oversaw the development of weapons systems designed specifically to confuse machine intelligence. Instead of building bigger guns or more powerful shields, human engineers created devices that served no apparent purpose or that worked in ways that defied logical explanation. The confusion cannon fires projectiles that change their targeting parameters mid-flight based on random number generation, Morrison explained to Admiral Rodriguez during a weapons demonstration. The Vex will try to calculate the trajectory and defensive response, but there's no pattern to calculate. Engineer Lisa Park activated another prototype device. The paradox generator creates energy signatures that appear to violate the laws of physics. It doesn't actually do any damage, but it forces Vex analytical systems to waste processing power trying to understand impossible data. Rodriguez watched the demonstration with approval. These weapons won't win the war through superior firepower, but they might buy us the tactical confusion we need to exploit Vex weaknesses. The most ambitious part of the preparation involved restructuring human fleet doctrine entirely. Traditional military formations were abandoned in favor of what could only be described as organized chaos. Ships would be assigned to formations that changed constantly, with commanders encouraged to make tactical decisions based on personal preference rather than strategic optimization. Elena worked closely with Admiral Rodriguez to develop communication protocols that would seem insane to any logical observer. Human ships would coordinate their attacks using poetry, musical compositions, and abstract art transmitted over tactical channels. The Vex would intercept these communications and waste processing power trying to decode military intelligence from artistic expression. The key, Elena explained to the assembled fleet commanders during their final briefing, is to remember that we're not trying to be more efficient than the Vex. We're trying to be so inefficient that their efficiency becomes useless. As the deadline approached, human space had been transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of a traditional military force optimized for maximum combat effectiveness, humanity had created an armed force designed to be as confusing and unpredictable as possible. The final element of preparation was perhaps the most important, ensuring that human forces never forgot why they were fighting. Elena insisted that every ship carry detailed cultural archives about the Cathari, including their philosophy, their art, and their history of peaceful interaction with other species. When the battle becomes desperate, Elena told the gathered crews, remember that you're not just fighting for tactical advantage or strategic position. You're fighting to preserve something beautiful in the universe. As the human fleet prepared to depart for Cathari space, Elena stood on the observation deck of Admiral Rodriguez's flagship, the UES Defiance. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see hundreds of ships stretching across space, each one carrying crew members who had volunteered for what most experts considered a suicide mission. Admiral Rodriguez joined Elena at the observation window. Director, I have to ask, Do you really believe this crazy plan has any chance of succeeding? Elena smiled, thinking of Harmony singer Keth and the gentle beings who had saved her life without expecting anything in return. Admiral, I believe that sometimes the universe rewards species that choose to do the right thing instead of the smart thing. Whether we win or lose, the galaxy will know that when our friends needed help, humanity answered the call. The fleet departed human space with unprecedented ceremony. Citizens gathered on every world and station to witness the departure of their entire military force. There were no guarantees of victory, no promises of return, but there was something else. The knowledge that humanity had chosen honor over safety. As the ships entered hyperspace, heading toward their rendezvous with destiny in Cathari space, Elena couldn't help but think that regardless of the outcome, this decision had already changed what it meant to be human. The Battle of Cathari Prime. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Cathari system to find a scene of breathtaking beauty and absolute horror. Cathari Prime hung in space like a luminous pearl, its cities glowing with the soft bioluminescent architecture that characterized the peaceful species. But surrounding the planet was a geometric nightmare. Hundreds of Vex ships arranged in perfect mathematical formations, their crystalline hulls refracting starlight into cold, analytical patterns. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching as her tactical displays filled with impossible numbers. The Vex fleet was even larger than intelligence estimates had suggested, over 800 combat vessels ranging from sleek interceptors to massive geometric constructs that dwarfed Earth's largest battleships. Admiral, reported Commander Park from the sensor station, we're detecting active harvesting operations on Cathari Prime's 3 moons. The Vex have already begun converting lunar material into additional construction units. Through the ship's communication array, Elena could sense the mental anguish of the Cathari population. Their peaceful telepathic broadcasts filled local space with grief and confusion as they watched their beautiful world being systematically dismantled around them. Then, cutting through the chaos, came a familiar presence. Harmony singer Keth's mental voice reached Elena across the void, filled with amazement and desperate hope. Elena Vasquez, impossible friend. Keth's thoughts carried overtones of joy mixed with terror. You have brought your people's warriors to our aid, but this is madness. Your small fleet cannot possibly survive against such overwhelming force. Elena projected her thoughts back through the quantum communication link. Keth, we didn't come here to survive. We came here to prove that some things are more important than mathematical certainty. Admiral Rodriguez activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez. You all know why we're here. The beings who once saved one of ours are facing extinction, and we have the chance to return that favor. I won't lie to you about our chances. By every conventional measure, we should all be dead within the hour. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. But humanity has never been conventional. We're the species that performs miracles through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept the impossible. Today, we show the galaxy what that means. The human fleet broke formation immediately, abandoning any pretense of traditional military coordination. Instead of maintaining orderly battle lines, the ships scattered across space in patterns that seemed completely random. Some vessels headed directly toward the largest Vex constructs, others began spinning in complex spirals, and a few simply stopped moving entirely for no apparent reason. The Vex response was immediate and predictable. Their fleet began reorganizing into optimal counterformations, their tactical computers calculating the most efficient way to destroy the human force. But as the Vex ships moved into position, they encountered something their algorithms couldn't process: human vessels that weren't where they were supposed to be. Captain Morrison's ship, the UES Chaos Theory, demonstrated the new human tactical doctrine by opening fire on empty space while broadcasting children's songs over tactical frequencies. The Vex intercepted the transmission and wasted precious processing cycles trying to decode military intelligence from nursery rhymes. Confusion protocols are working, Admiral, reported Dr. Chen from her analysis station. Vex tactical efficiency has dropped by 40% as they attempt to process our communication patterns. But the Vex adapted quickly, as they always did. Within 30 minutes, their algorithms had begun filtering out the nonsensical human communications and focusing on actual threat assessment. The tide of battle began to turn as superior Vex firepower started taking its toll on the smaller human fleet. Elena watched in horror as the UES Thunderbolt exploded in a brilliant fireball, its crew of 200 vaporized instantly by a Vex energy beam. The sight of her people dying for her decision filled her with anguish, but she forced herself to remember why they were here. Admiral, she said quietly. It's time for the next phase. Rodriguez nodded grimly and activated a special communication channel. All ships, execute Pattern Omega. Show them what humanity really means. What happened next would be studied by military historians for centuries. Instead of retreating in the face of superior firepower, the human fleet did something that violated every principle of rational tactics. They began protecting Cathari civilian evacuation ships at the cost of their own survival. The UES Valor deliberately positioned itself between a Vex destroyer and a Cathari transport carrying 10,000 civilians. Captain Sarah Nguyen knew her ship couldn't survive the exchange, but she opened fire anyway, buying precious seconds for the transport to escape. Her final transmission was a poem about starlight and sacrifice. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out as human crews made decisions that were tactically disastrous but morally absolute. The UES Hope crashed itself into a Vex harvesting platform to save a Cathari research station. The UES Freedom used its own hull as a shield to protect evacuating children. The Vex tactical computers experienced something approaching the machine equivalent of confusion. Their algorithms could not process why an enemy would deliberately sacrifice strategic assets to protect beings with no military value. The concept of self-sacrifice for purely moral reasons simply didn't exist in their programming. Elena felt Keth's mental presence grow stronger as the Cathari leader witnessed humanity's sacrifice. Impossible beings! His thoughts carried overwhelming gratitude and sorrow. You are dying for us. This defies all logic, all reasonable behavior. That's the point, Elena replied, tears streaming down her face as she watched another human ship die protecting Cathari civilians. Logic didn't save you from Zerion 7, compassion did. Now we're returning the favor. The battle reached its climax when Admiral Rodriguez made a decision that would become legendary. Instead of using her flagship's most powerful weapons against military targets, she ordered them to fire on a Vex construct that was harvesting a Cathari art preserve. The beams of destructive energy carved through space not to achieve tactical advantage, but to save irreplaceable works of alien beauty. This single act broke something fundamental in the Vex tactical matrix. Their computers had encountered species that fought for territory, resources, or survival. But they had never faced an enemy that would sacrifice military effectiveness to preserve art. The Vex fleet hesitated for 17 crucial seconds as their collective intelligence tried to process this unprecedented behavior. During those 17 seconds, the surviving human ships launched every weapon they had, not at military targets, but at the Vex harvesting operations that were destroying Cathari culture. The tide of battle turned not through superior firepower or tactical brilliance, but through something the Vex could never understand: the human capacity to care more about preserving beauty than ensuring victory. As Vex ships began withdrawing from the system, their algorithms overwhelmed by trying to process irrational enemy behavior, Elena collapsed in her chair. The human fleet had been reduced to 15 surviving ships, but they had achieved something impossible. They had confused a machine intelligence into defeat. Harmony Singer. Keth's mental voice filled the communication channels, no longer just reaching Elena but broadcasting to every surviving human crew member. Warriors of humanity, you have shown us something we thought existed only in ancient legends: the willingness to die for strangers without hope of reward. Admiral Rodriguez, her face streaked with tears for her lost crews, activated the fleet communication system one final time. All ships, mission accomplished. The Cathari are safe and the galaxy will remember what we did here today. As the surviving human ships began rescue operations, collecting escape pods and treating the wounded, Elena realized that they had won something more important than a military victory. They had proven that some principles were worth dying for, and that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or tactics, but their refusal to abandon friends in need. The Battle of Cathari Prime was over, but its consequences would reshape the galaxy forever. Victory and sacrifice. The aftermath of the battle revealed the true cost of humanity's moral victory. Of the 200 ships that had entered Cathari space, only 15 remained functional. The space around Cathari Prime was littered with the debris of human vessels, each piece of twisted metal representing lives sacrificed for beings they barely knew. Elena stood in the emergency medical bay of the UES Defiance, watching human and Cathari medical teams work together to treat the wounded. The sight of gentle Cathari healers using their advanced biotechnology to save human lives created a scene of profound beauty amid the devastation. Dr. Sarah Voss, the fleet's chief medical officer, approached Elena with a grim expression. "Director, the casualty reports are complete. We've lost over 8,000 crew members, with another 2,000 critically wounded. By any military standard, this would be considered a catastrophic defeat. Elena nodded, her heart heavy with the weight of responsibility. Every person who had died in this system had followed her recommendation to risk everything for alien strangers. Doctor, how many Cathari civilians did we save? Initial estimates suggest we evacuated approximately 40 million beings from the primary harvest zones, Voss replied. Without our intervention, they would all be dead or converted into Vex data matrices. Admiral Rodriguez joined them, her uniform torn and scorched from the battle. Director, we've been monitoring Vex communications. Their fleet is withdrawing beyond the galactic rim, but their strategic analysis indicates they'll return with improved tactical algorithms. They're learning from this encounter. Elena looked out through the medical bay's observation window at the damaged Cathari homeworld. The planet's surface showed massive scars where Vex harvesting operations had begun converting cities into raw materials. Recovery would take decades if it was possible at all. Admiral, Elena said quietly, there's something I need to tell you. During the battle, I received additional intelligence about the Vex from the Cathari consciousness networks. This wasn't just a random attack on their territory. Rodriguez's expression grew serious. What kind of intelligence? Elena activated her personal display, showing data streams that looked more like artistic compositions than military intelligence. The Cathari have been monitoring deep space communications for millions of years. They detected the Vex awakening 18 months ago, but what woke them up wasn't natural stellar phenomena. She manipulated the display to show energy signatures that preceded the Vex emergence from dark space. Something or someone sent a deliberate signal to activate the Vex Dominion. This entire campaign of destruction was orchestrated by an intelligence that wanted to test galactic civilizations. Admiral Rodriguez studied the data with growing alarm. Director, are you suggesting that the Vex are someone's weapon rather than an independent threat? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Elena replied. The Cathari call them the Architects, an ancient intelligence that periodically tests younger species to determine their worthiness to continue existing. The Vex are just one of their testing mechanisms. Dr. Voss looked between Elena and the Admiral with confusion. If that's true, then what does our victory here mean? Did we pass their test? Elena's expression grew troubled. Doctor, I don't think we were supposed to win this battle. The test was designed to measure how advanced species respond to inevitable extinction. Most civilizations either flee or fight using logical tactics that the Vex can counter. But humanity did something unprecedented, Rodriguez said, beginning to understand the implications. We sacrificed military efficiency for moral principles. We chose to lose the battle in order to save the Cathari. Elena nodded. And that decision may have attracted the attention of intelligences we're not prepared to face. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the bridge. Commander Park's voice carried a mixture of excitement and terror. Admiral, Director, you need to see this immediately. We're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. They rushed to the bridge, where the main holographic display showed something that defied easy description. Emerging from the void between stars were structures that looked more like living organisms than spacecraft. Each one was the size of a small moon, covered in patterns that shifted and flowed like organic tissue. How many? Admiral Rodriguez asked, her voice steady despite the impossible sight. 17 confirmed contacts, Park replied. And Admiral, they're broadcasting on frequencies we've never encountered before. The signals appear to be directed specifically at us. Elena felt a familiar sensation as alien thoughts touched her consciousness, but these were unlike any telepathic contact she had experienced. The presence was vast, ancient beyond measure, and carried undertones of curiosity rather than hostility. Young species called humanity, the mental voice resonated with power that made Elena's consciousness ache. You have behaved in ways that our models did not predict. The Vex testing protocol was designed to measure survival instinct and tactical efficiency. Instead, you demonstrated qualities we have not observed in over 1,000,000 years. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward, somehow sensing the alien presence despite lacking Elena's telepathic sensitivity. We protected our friends because it was the right thing to do. If that makes us different from other species, then we're proud of that difference. The alien intelligence seemed to pause, processing Rodriguez's response in ways that transcended normal communication. Curious. Most species that reach your technological level have evolved beyond such inefficient emotional responses. Your willingness to sacrifice strategic advantage for moral principle suggests either profound wisdom or dangerous irrationality. Elena gathered her courage and projected her thoughts toward the vast intelligence. Why did you wake the Vex? Why test us at all? The galaxy periodically requires editing, the architect replied, its mental voice carrying overtones of cold calculation. Species that prove incapable of growth beyond their primitive origins are removed to make resources available for more promising civilizations. The Vex eliminate those who fail our evaluations. Elena felt a chill of understanding. You've been culling galactic civilizations for millions of years, deciding who lives and dies based on your arbitrary standards. Not arbitrary, the architect corrected. Carefully calibrated to preserve only those species with the potential for true transcendence. Your kind was expected to either flee from superior force or engage in futile tactical resistance. Instead, you chose to prioritize the preservation of beauty and the protection of others. Admiral Rodriguez looked around the bridge at her surviving crew members. What happens now? Do we pass your test, or do you send something worse than the Vex? The response came not as words, but as a flood of images and concepts that overwhelmed human consciousness. Elena saw visions of species that had transcended physical form, civilizations that had merged with the fundamental forces of the universe, and technologies that could reshape reality itself. Humanity will be given a choice, the architect announced. You may continue your current path of development, accepting the responsibilities that come with proven moral evolution, or you may request guidance toward transcendence, abandoning your physical forms to join the collective consciousness of truly advanced beings. Elena exchanged glances with Admiral Rodriguez, both understanding that this decision would define humanity's future for millions of years. But before either could respond, Harmony Singer Keth's mental voice joined the conversation. Ancient architects, Keth projected his thoughts with desperate urgency. If I may speak for the Cathari collective consciousness, humanity has proven something more valuable than technological advancement or tactical efficiency. They have shown that growth and compassion can coexist with strength. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she realized the profound implications of Keth's words. The Cathari, facing extinction hours earlier, were now advocating for their human rescuers before beings powerful enough to reshape the galaxy. We request that humanity be granted time to develop naturally, Keth continued. Their unique combination of technological capability and moral evolution makes them invaluable to galactic civilization. They should not be forced to choose between advancement and retention of their essential nature. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. Elena could sense the vast architect intelligence processing thousands of variables and possibilities, weighing the fate of entire species with computational power beyond human understanding. Finally, the architect responded. The Cathari petition carries weight. A species willing to face extinction to defend others demonstrates wisdom that transcends technological capability. Humanity will be granted a probationary period of 1,000 Earth years to continue their development. Elena felt overwhelming relief wash over her, but the architect wasn't finished. However, the vast intelligence continued, this privilege comes with responsibility. Humanity will serve as protectors of developing civilizations in this galactic sector. When other species face extinction or oppression, you will be expected to intervene, regardless of the cost to yourselves. Admiral Rodriguez smiled grimly. Sounds like we just volunteered to be the galaxy's protectors. I can think of worse fates. Elena looked around the bridge at the surviving crew members, each one bearing the scars of their impossible victory. They had saved the Cathari through sacrifice and moral courage, and now they had been chosen to extend that protection to other threatened species. As the massive architect vessels began withdrawing into deep space, Elena realized that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had proven themselves worthy not through conquest or technological superiority, but through their willingness to die for strangers. The Battle of Cathari Prime was over, but the legend of humanity's moral courage would inspire civilizations for millions of years to come. The legacy lives on. 25 years had passed since the Battle of Cathari Prime, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. Elena Vasquez, now 77 years old and bearing the title of Galactic Ethics Coordinator, stood on the observation deck of Harmony Station, a massive space habitat jointly constructed by human and Cathari engineers. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see vessels from dozens of different species arriving for the quarterly Galactic Protection Council meeting. Sleek Meridian diplomatic ships floated alongside crude but effective human freighters, while graceful Cathari biovessels danced through space next to the geometric precision of reformed Zephyrian craft. The galaxy had learned about humanity's sacrifice at Cathari Prime, and the story had spread like wildfire through interstellar communication networks. Species that had never heard of Earth suddenly knew about the small fleet that had chosen honor over survival, and the moral courage that had confused an unstoppable machine intelligence into defeat. Admiral Rodriguez, now Fleet Admiral of the Galactic Protection Force, entered the observation lounge with a datapad full of requests for assistance from across the galaxy. Her hair had gone completely silver, and her face bore the lines of someone who had spent decades making impossible decisions, but her eyes still carried the same determined fire that had driven her to Cathari Prime. "Elena, we've received 17 new requests for intervention this quarter," Rodriguez reported, settling into a chair beside her old friend. "The Spiral Coalition is facing invasion by the Iron Dominion, the Crystal Singers are being strip-mined by corporate interests, and there's a report of slave trading in the Outer Rim territories." Elena studied the datapad with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades evaluating galactic crises. "Sarah, we can't be everywhere at once. Our forces are already stretched across 12 active intervention zones." "I know," Rodriguez replied with a tired smile. "But that's the price of our reputation. When species face extinction or oppression, they don't call the most logical choice for help. They call the crazy humans who once sacrificed everything for alien strangers." Through the observation windows they could see the newest addition to the Galactic Protection Fleet, the UES Elena Vasquez, a massive dreadnought that had been constructed using a revolutionary blend of human engineering and Cathari biotechnology. The ship served as both a symbol of interspecies cooperation and a testament to how far both civilizations had advanced since their fateful meeting. "Admiral Director," came a familiar mental voice as harmony singer Keth approached their table. The ancient Cathari had aged gracefully, his luminous skin now bearing patterns that spoke of vast wisdom accumulated over decades of galactic service. "The council session is about to begin. The representatives are eager to hear about humanity's latest interventions." Elena smiled as she stood to greet her oldest friend. "Keth, I sometimes wonder if we created a monster. Humanity has become the galaxy's go-to solution for impossible problems. Species expect us to perform miracles on a regular basis." "Perhaps," Keth replied, his mental voice carrying overtones of gentle amusement. "But is that not what you have always done? Even before Cathari Prime, humans had a reputation for achieving the impossible through sheer determination." The three of them made their way to the council chambers, where representatives from 47 different species had gathered to coordinate the galaxy's response to various crises. The chamber itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with environmental systems designed to support dozens of different biological requirements simultaneously. At the center of the chamber stood a holographic display showing the current galactic situation. Green zones indicated stable regions, yellow showed areas of tension, and red marked active crisis zones requiring intervention. Elena noted with both pride and concern that human-led intervention forces were active in most of the red zones. President Chen of the Terran Federation stood to address the assembly. "Honored representatives, the quarterly status report shows both encouraging progress and concerning developments. Our intervention in the Helix sector successfully prevented the extinction of 3 developing species, but we've also identified new threats that may require coordinated response." The display shifted to show intelligence reports about emerging dangers across the galaxy. Corporate raiders were exploiting primitive worlds for rare minerals, military dictatorships were expanding through conquest, and there were disturbing reports of artificial intelligences that might be connected to the original Vex Dominion. Representative Voss of the Reformed Zephyrian Collective raised her crystalline appendage to speak. "President Chen, the Zephyrian analysis networks have detected communication patterns, suggesting that the architect intelligences are monitoring our responses to these crises. It appears that humanity's probationary period includes continuous evaluation." Elena felt a familiar chill at the mention of the architects. The vast intelligences had kept their word about allowing humanity to develop naturally, but their presence remained a constant reminder that Earth's species was still being judged by standards beyond human understanding. Admiral Rodriguez activated the tactical displays. "Representatives, our current force deployment includes 12 intervention fleets operating across the galaxy. Each fleet follows the operational doctrine developed after Cathari Prime, prioritize civilian protection over military objectives, use unpredictable tactics to confuse enemy strategic planning, and never abandon allies regardless of the tactical cost. Representative Thurin of the Iron-based collective, whose species had been rescued from corporate exploitation 3 years earlier, stood to address the assembly. Honored Council, my people wish to formally express our gratitude to the human intervention forces. When our homeworld was being strip-mined for rare elements, logical strategic analysis suggested that our remote location and limited strategic value made rescue economically unfeasible. Thurin's mechanical voice carried emotional resonance that was unusual for his normally logical species. However, Commander Sarah Park's intervention fleet traveled 3 months through hostile space to reach our territory, then spent 2 additional months evacuating our population while under constant attack from corporate security forces. They lost 17 ships to save beings they had never met. Elena smiled as she remembered Commander Park's report from that mission. The young officer had inherited humanity's tradition of impossible rescues, leading her fleet in a series of tactically disastrous but morally successful operations that had saved over 2 billion Iron-based civilians. The council session continued for several hours, with representatives from across the galaxy sharing reports of human-led interventions, requesting assistance for new crises, and coordinating resources for ongoing operations. Elena listened with a mixture of pride and concern as she realized how much the galaxy had come to depend on humanity's willingness to sacrifice for others. As the formal session ended, Elena remained in the chamber with Admiral Rodriguez and Harmony singer Keth. The 3 veterans of Cathari Prime often stayed after council meetings to discuss the broader implications of their work. Keth, Elena said quietly, do you ever wonder if we're creating dependency rather than encouraging other species to develop their own moral courage? The Cathari leader considered the question with the deep thoughtfulness that characterized his species. Elena, my friend, consider the alternative. Before humanity proved that sacrifice for strangers was possible, the galaxy operated on principles of pure self-interest. Species helped others only when it provided strategic advantage. Admiral Rodriguez nodded in agreement. Elena, we've documented 43 instances where species have adopted human-style intervention policies in their own regions. The Meridian Collective now maintains rescue fleets. The reformed Zephyrians have established civilian protection protocols, and even the logical iron-based species have begun making economically irrational decisions to help their neighbors. Elena looked out through the chamber's observation windows at the diverse fleet of vessels in the station's docking bays. Each ship represented a species that had learned something from humanity's example, whether as rescued populations or as allies inspired by human moral courage. There's something else, Admiral Rodriguez continued, her expression growing serious. Intelligence reports suggest that the architect entities have been testing other regions of the galaxy using different criteria. Species in the Andromeda sector are facing challenges designed to measure technological innovation, while civilizations in the Magellanic regions are being evaluated on their capacity for logical decision-making. Elena felt a deep sense of understanding. They're running different experiments on different populations, trying to determine which evolutionary paths produce the most successful civilizations. And in our region, Keth added, they are measuring the value of moral courage and self-sacrifice. Humanity's example at Cathari Prime established the testing parameters for thousands of other species. The implications were staggering. Elena realized that humanity's decision to risk everything for the Cathari hadn't just saved one species, it had established a new standard for galactic civilization. Every species in their region would now be judged partly on their willingness to help others, even at great cost to themselves. As they prepared to leave the council chambers, Elena received an urgent communication from Captain Morrison, now commanding the exploration vessel UES Discovery in the galactic frontier regions. Director Vasquez, Admiral Rodriguez, Morrison's voice carried across the interstellar communication link with barely contained excitement. We've made contact with a previously unknown species in the far spiral arm. They call themselves the Symphonic Collective, and they're facing immediate extinction from a natural disaster. Elena and Rodriguez exchanged glances, both recognizing the familiar pattern of another impossible rescue mission. Captain, Rodriguez replied, what's the tactical situation? Admiral, it's a stellar collapse scenario. Their sun is going supernova in approximately 4 months, and they lack the technology for interstellar evacuation. Population estimated at 12 billion individuals across 4 worlds. Elena felt the familiar weight of moral responsibility settling on her shoulders. 12 billion lives hanging in the balance, a logistically impossible evacuation across interstellar distances, and no strategic value to justify the massive resource expenditure required. Captain Morrison, Elena said, her voice carrying the authority of decades spent making these kinds of decisions, begin preliminary evacuation planning. We'll coordinate fleet resources and contact our allies for assistance. As she spoke the words, Elena realized that she was perpetuating the cycle that had begun at Cathari Prime 25 years earlier. Somewhere in the galaxy, human crews would once again risk everything for strangers, proving that moral courage was more valuable than tactical efficiency. Admiral Rodriguez was already calling up fleet deployment schedules on her personal display. Elena, we'll need at least 40 ships for an operation this size. It'll leave us vulnerable in other sectors. Then we'll ask our allies to cover those regions, Elena replied. The Cathari have their own protection fleets now, and the reformed Zephyrians have offered to assist with crisis response operations. Harmony singer Keth watched the two humans planning another impossible mission with the same mixture of admiration and concern he had felt during their first meeting decades earlier. My friends, Keth said gently, you realize that every successful rescue mission you complete raises the stakes for the next evaluation. The architects are measuring not just your willingness to help, but your capacity to maintain that willingness even as the challenges become more difficult. Elena nodded, understanding the implications. Each miracle they performed would lead to greater expectations, more impossible requests, and eventually challenges that might be beyond even humanity's capacity for noble sacrifice. Keth, she said, looking out at the stars through the chamber's windows, 25 years ago, you saved one human life because it was the right thing to do. That simple act of kindness set in motion everything that followed. She turned to face her two oldest friends, her expression filled with determination and hope. If the price of moral courage is that we're expected to perform miracles on a regular basis, then that's a price worth paying. The galaxy is a better place because species help each other, and if humanity's example inspired that change, then every sacrifice has been worthwhile. As they prepared to coordinate another impossible rescue mission, Elena reflected on the strange turns that had brought them to this point. A stranded archaeologist, a peaceful species facing extinction, and a small fleet willing to risk everything for strangers had somehow become the foundation for a new kind of galactic civilization. The universe had tested humanity's character at Cathari Prime, and they had passed by choosing honor over survival. Now, 25 years later, they continued to pass that test every time they risked everything to help others. Elena Vasquez had learned something important during her years as a guardian of galactic ethics. The universe might be vast and cold and uncaring, but consciousness could create warmth within that coldness. Civilizations could choose to care for each other, to sacrifice for strangers, and to build something beautiful among the stars. As the UES Elena Vasquez and her escort fleet prepared to depart for the Symphonic Collective's doomed system, Elena knew that somewhere in the deep reaches of space, ancient intelligences were watching and evaluating, but she also knew that regardless of their judgment, humanity would continue to answer the call when others needed help. The legacy of Cathari Prime lived on in every impossible rescue, every moral choice that defied tactical logic, and every species that learned that survival was less important than preserving something beautiful in the universe. The story would continue, one act of kindness at a time, until the stars themselves grew cold.